Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about some poetry that I read because it is Poetry Thursday. A great day to talk about all the poetry that has interested or motivated me. And today I have a fairly interesting poem. It is about dog adoption, or a mother's excuse for why her child cannot adopt a dog. I am talking about You Wouldn't Let Me Adopt a Dog by Patricia Wesley. For those who don't know, Patricia Wesley is a Liberian-American poet. She was born in Liberia, but her family fled the Civil War in the 90s, making her way eventually to Michigan and becoming a writer and writing somewhat frequently since the 90s, writing a lot of poetry that often focuses on Liberia and her family and her experiences as a Black woman in America. There is a particularly interesting poem about her writing about the experience of selling a home as a Liberian woman in America, and it's a really fascinating poem. I almost picked that one to talk about today, but I decided to go with the one that I am talking about right now. Seems like an interesting poet. Don't know too much else about her, but I would encourage everyone to go read more of her work, find out more about her, as she seems like an interesting person. So without further ado, I'm going to read the poem. I'll do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. You Wouldn't Let Me Adopt My Dog, a poem for Ade Jua. Mom, you wouldn't let me adopt a dog in my dream, my daughter tells me. Really? Go back to your dream, my child, and adopt that dog, I say. Tend to it, humor it, take it to the vet. Clip its toenails, give it antibiotics, and let it run wild on our lawn. Allow it to pull at the neighbors' flowers. Let it dig up their wooden fence. Knock down other people's flower pots. Give it a name, and let it roll under your comforter. Let it eat out of your bowl. Tell the dog that its grandmother loves it very much. She loves it as long as it remains in the dream world of uneven spaces. So improperly laid out, the dreamer cannot bring back into the real world what belongs to the dream world. May your dog grow old and tired beyond dog years, and may it give birth to many dog babies to help populate the dream universe. I want to squat when I greet your dog and let it lick my ring finger clean. I want your dog to linger upon my doorstep while I stroke its head. I want to populate your dream world with myself, even as a dog that I'm so afraid of lives and leaps. Go back, my sweet Ade, and tell the dog how welcome it is, no matter what kind of dog it is. But let it know that my knees now hurt. My back wants to give way after too many babies, and last night my hip began to send new signals my way, as if I were a bag of electric waves, trying to tell the world I'm done. Tell your dog that I do not have the resume to tend to an American dog. Tell him I am still African, in the way that my mother woke up each day wondering where the food for us children would come from. Tell your dog that I love dogs, but I wonder if the child somewhere in my home village had a bowl of dry rice and palm oil to eat this morning. Tell him my father still needs me to send money to feed a house full of motherless children who have taken to living with him after the war. Tell the dog that if I become rich and famous, I'll let you cross over the threshold of the dream world into the real and bring him home to meet his new family, where his grandmother stands over the kitchen sink, wet hands and eyes, listening to Ade Jua as if the things that plague this world were not much bigger than a dream, as if the life of one small dog were larger than life. And so that was You Wouldn't Let Me Adopt My Dog. In terms of analysis, I think it's easy to see what this poem is getting at. In terms of narrative, the the narrator, who is the mother, is telling their daughter that they can go back into the dream world and play around with this dog all they want, but they eventually reveal that they just don't have the space in the house. They don't have the money to support a dog. They don't, and the narrator, the mom, it doesn't really have the body to support a dog because dogs have a lot of energy, and this mother is older and her body is worn out a little bit, and so she doesn't have the energy to keep up with this dog anymore. And we know that, kids will try to keep up with the dog, but it's still a lot of responsibility to have a dog. And I think as I say this, I've become my parents, where I'm like, it's a lot of responsibility to have a dog. And it is like, you got to feed it and walk it and clean it and pick up after it. And, just make sure that it's not doing harmful things to itself. And that can be a lot for one person to have responsibility for, which is why, people often don't get dogs until they're in a relationship or something like that. And ultimately, the narrator in this poem, the mother, says that they would let the child cross over into the dream world if they had enough money, if they had enough resources, get the dog and bring it back. And ultimately they say to their child, Ade Jua, like they wish there were greater things that the life of a dog was more important than the life of everything else. And I really like that. It's like admitting to your child, I would love for you to have a dog. You deserve great things, but I can't support it. There's just too much going on. You see in the poem, I like the way that she talks about the energy needed. She says, but let it know that my knees now hurt. My back wants to give way after too many babies. And last night, my hip began to send new signals my way as if I were a bag of electric waves. And I really like that phrasing, as if I were a bag of electric waves, just sending new signals like, oh, your hip hurts now. You're not going to be able to do what you had done before with that hip. And it goes even much deeper than that in the poem. It's not just that it's a lot of responsibility. The narrator is still sending money home to Liberia after leaving, so that her father and the children who her father are raising, the orphans, will be able to have something to eat. And as long as that's going on, if she has a dog, if the mother has a dog, she's always going to be wondering, is the food that's going to this dog enough? Or is it food that's being taken away from these children who are clearly more in need? I think it really highlights how, in many cases, in many cultures, a dog is a luxury animal. It costs a lot of money to have, and it's man's best friend, but that doesn't stop it from being a lot of money to have, and that feeding that dog requires money that might have been well spent to paying other bills or something like that. And so the way I would like to read this, or the way that this poem speaks to me, is maybe the mother not actually saying this to the child. Maybe they said no, and this is their way of sort of in their head trying to reconcile the fact that they told their child no, that they disappointed their child in the fact that they wanted a dog. It's I would love for you to have a dog, but all of these things prevent me from really being happy with having an animal in the household. And, I think that Wesley does a really good job of bringing in her own background into this poem, showing that the experience of living during a war, even years later, this might take place years later, still the fact that you were in a war and that you had to ration food and live on a small number of resources might still be affecting you. And so even though you might have the resources eventually, you still might find it difficult to adopt an animal because of everything that had happened to you. Anyway, those are my thoughts on You Wouldn't Let Me Adopt My Dog by Patricia Wesley. A pretty good poem, one that I'm going to recommend that you go out and read. Tell me your thoughts on it in the comments below. I will put a link to it in the description so that you can read it for yourself. Otherwise, if you want to continue the conversation or something like that, don't hesitate to comment below, and don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this poem and this poet if they don't already know about Patricia. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and dog ownership travels. Farewell.